The wind carried dust across the wide stretch of prairie, the kind of land where silence spoke louder than words, and a woman named Clara stood on the edge of it with nothing but a worn satchel, a tired baby boy in her arms, and no place she could truly call home. Her life had once been simple, once had laughter and warm fires in the hearth, but it all shattered when her husband was taken too soon in a mining accident, leaving her to face the world alone. The little cabin they had shared belonged to the company, and with his death came eviction. She wandered from town to town, her son pressed against her chest, his soft cries breaking her heart with every mile. Food was scarce, shelter even scarcer, and though neighbors offered temporary kindness, pity always had an expiration date. That afternoon, with the sun high and merciless, she found herself on the outskirts of a small western town, staring at the faded sign of a saloon and wondering how much longer she could go on. Her boy stirred, eyes wide and innocent, trusting her with every breath he took. She whispered, "I'll find us a way. I promise." Though her voice cracked with the weight of a vow she didn't know how to keep, that was when a figure appeared, riding tall on a chestnut horse, dust swirling behind him as though the earth itself parted at his arrival. He was a cowboy, lean and strong, with a shadowed jaw, sunburned skin, and a presence that seemed carved from the land itself. His name was Luke, though she would only learn that later. What she knew in that first moment was the sharp way his eyes narrowed on her, not in judgment but in concern, as though he could see every mile of hardship she'd carried. He dismounted, boots crunching against gravel, and asked in a voice low but steady, "Ma'am, you look like you're running on nothing. You and that baby shouldn't be out here alone." The words hit Clara like a floodgate breaking. She tried to stand straighter, tried to mask the exhaustion that bent her shoulders, but she couldn't keep the truth from spilling through her eyes. "We've got nowhere left," she admitted softly, her voice breaking into the wind. Luke studied her for a long moment before his gaze softened. "No one should live without a place to belong," he said, glancing at the child in her arms. "Come with me." She hesitated because trust was something she had learned to ration more carefully than food, but the calm certainty in his tone made her feel something she hadn't in months, safe. With a small nod, she followed him, not knowing that this simple step would begin a story far greater than either of them could imagine. Luke's ranch lay a few miles outside town, spread across rolling fields that met the sky in an endless stretch of golden light. The house was sturdy, weathered but strong like its owner, and the barn smelled of hay and honest work. As they arrived, Luke held out a hand to help her down from the wagon he'd hitched for her ride. "You'll stay here," he 2-3 said simply, as though it had already been decided. "There's room, and more than enough work to go around if you're willing." Clara felt her throat tighten with emotion. "Why are you doing this for us?" she whispered, holding her baby close. Luke adjusted his hat, his eyes steady on hers. "Because I know what it feels like to be left with nothing. Lost my family when I was young. A neighbor took me in, gave me the chance to stand again. I reckon it's my turn to do the same." His words sank into her heart like rain on parched soil, and for the first time in months, hope bloomed inside her chest. The days that followed were not easy, but they were filled with something Clara had thought forever lost: belonging. Luke taught her how to milk the cows, how to tend to the garden, how to mend fences and drive cattle. She worked hard, her baby always nearby in a basket of blankets or resting in the crook of her arm, and though her muscles ached, there was a quiet satisfaction in the labor. Each night when the baby drifted to sleep, Clara would sit on the porch with Luke, watching the stars spill across the endless sky. They didn't speak much, but they didn't need to. Silence was a language all its own out there, and in the quiet, trust began to grow. One evening, after a long day of work, Clara's son cried louder than usual, his small body racked with fever. Panic tore through her as she tried everything: cool cloths, gentle rocking, whispered prayers, but nothing seemed to soothe him. Tears welled in her eyes as she clutched the baby, terrified of losing the only piece of her husband she had left. Luke knelt beside her, his large hand steadying hers. "We'll ride to the doctor in town," he said firmly. "He'll be all right. You're not alone anymore. Clara, not ever again." Those words wrapped around her like a shield, and together they raced through the night, the stars blurring above them. The doctor assured them it was nothing more than a fever that would pass, and relief poured over Clara like sunlight after storm clouds. She turned to Luke then, seeing not just the cowboy who had offered her shelter, but the man who had carried her through her darkest moment without hesitation. Gratitude swelled inside her, deeper than words could capture. Weeks turned to months, and slowly, laughter returned to Clara's life. She found herself smiling when her son toddled across the porch, when Luke told her stories of wild horses and narrow escapes, when the scent of fresh bread filled the kitchen they shared. The ranch was no longer just Luke's, it became theirs. Every nail and board infused with the spirit of family they were building together. One afternoon, as she hung laundry on the line, Luke approached, his hat in his hands and his voice quieter than she'd ever heard it. "Clara," he began, "I meant what I said the day I found you. You deserve a place to belong. And I reckon you and that boy have already made this place into something more than I ever thought it could be. I don't know if I'm the man you need, but I'd sure like the chance to be." Her heart raced, not out of fear, but out of the realization that somewhere between the sunrise, mornings and starlit nights, she had fallen in love with the man who had built her more than a roof. He had built her hope again. Tears filled her eyes as she reached for his hand. "Luke, you already are." From then on, life was not perfect, but it was good. They faced storms, sickness, and hardship, but they faced it together. The ranch grew, the boy grew, and their love grew stronger than the winds that swept the prairie. Clara often thought back to that day outside the saloon, when she had been nothing more than a lost woman with a baby in her arms, and marveled at how far she had come. She knew the truth of it now. Home was not made of wood or stone, but of the people who stood beside you when the world had turned its back. Luke had given her that gift, and in return she gave him her heart. Together they built not just a house but a place to belong, and their story became one of the quiet legends, whispered through the town. The tale of the cowboy, who found a woman and her child with nothing, and gave them everything that mattered. And dear viewers, if this story touched your heart, if it made you believe again in hope and kindness, and in the power of love to rebuild broken lives, then make sure you subscribe to this channel. Every story we share is meant to inspire, to remind you that even in the darkest moments, there's always light waiting on the horizon. Join us, stay with us, and let these tales keep your spirit strong. Subscribe today because together we can keep hope alive.